News Talk 710 KNUS. Breaking news, intelligent talk. And now, America's #1 show on pop culture and politics. This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Sure, it's a great day. Sure, it's the greatest nation. But is it God's green earth? That is the subject under discussion with two of the most articulate and effective advocates for very, very different points of view on the subject of the influence of religion in our world. Christopher Hitchens is the author of God is Not Great, his book that is a full-scale assault on religious faith, what he believes to be the folly of religious faith and the destructive impact of organized religion around the world. Dinesh D'Souza is a very committed Catholic and is the author of the book What's So Great About Christianity, which is an impassioned plea for recognizing all of the good that Christianity does around the world. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Are you there?
We're here.
Yeah. Okay, good. I was hoping to acknowledge. And by the way, information about both books linked on our website for whatever your point of view. Let me start out by saying I know that you have debated one another before, and I know that you've looked at one another's books. Let me begin with Christopher Hitchens. What's the worst part of Dinesh D'Souza's book, the part of his book where you think he is just more flat-out, embarrassingly flat-footed wrong?
You know what? Not just for the sake of consensuality, I'd rather say why I think that his book is not so bad.
Oh, fine, all right, fine. If you choose to begin that way in the spirit of Christian charity.
Very often when I find that I'm debating with a believer, the real difficulty is in getting them to understand what I have myself said or what I myself believe. A lot of them look at you incredulously if you say, you know what, I haven't actually recognized Jesus Christ as my personal Savior. I don't think the Messiah is coming, if it might be a very Orthodox Jew, and I don't think he's even going to call. They don't get your point of view. The reason why I enjoy debating with Dinesh is that absolutely put the arm on him and paid him tons of money. He could, in theory, as a trained speaker and lawyer, he could get up and put my position and know what he was talking about.
Dinesh, what's the best part of Christopher Hitchens' book?
Well, I think that, there are two species of atheism out there. One is sort of scientific atheism, and that is the idea that sort of either that Darwinism has refuted the argument from design or simply that the scientific way of knowing is the only way. To me, that's the less interesting form of atheism. There's another species of atheism that can be called moral atheism, the idea that God is a tyrant, he's an enemy of freedom. This I see as Christopher Hitchens' distinctive form of atheism. I think it's an atheism that would have interested Dostoevsky, and he presents it not only, I think, intellectually in a challenging way, but I think also in a way that appeals to a lot of young people. It's a suave atheism of a kind that had before. So in that sense, I think it's perhaps the most attractive package of atheism that we have in the United States.
I mean, very generous of Dinesh to say that. In fact, the term I use for it is, my position is anti-theist, in that you can be a non-believer. Many people I know would describe themselves as being in this position, who nonetheless wishes that it were true, just can't let their wish dominate their mind enough to believe it. But think, if they were once believers, they have nostalgia for their belief. If they've never been believers, rather wish they could have faith. My reply is I can't think why you would want it to be true, that we would dwell forever under an indefinite, limitless celestial surveillance.
All right, let's go to what I believe to be the core of the disagreement here, which it's much tougher to debate articles of faith than it is to debate items of history and the current existence of society and human arrangements. You differ very, very markedly in terms of Dinesh's belief in the positive impact of Christianity on the world and Christopher's belief that all religion is a snare and a delusion and a destructive force. Dinesh, if you were to focus on the most positive impact of Christianity in the world today, how would you define it?
Well, I think that it's a very difficult task to define, because very often these debates disintegrate into things like, were the American founders really devout, and did Ben Franklin go regularly to church? Really, I think that if we look at the core ideas and assumptions and values of our society, even the values we consider secular, they derive from the very interesting symbiosis between Athens and Jerusalem. In other words, between classical reason, Greece and Rome on the one hand, and Judaism and Christianity on the other. So that things like separation of powers, checks and balances, our economic system, the idea of compassion as a social virtue, even the notion of scientific rigor and honesty, of truth as being a paramount value, the notion of a comprehensible, rational universe that it's the job of science to study. All of these ideas, which we take so much for granted, we don't even begin to think, where did they really come from? Are they truly universal human ideas, or do they come out of a rather distinctive cultural and intellectual legacy, which I think if you trace it back, it comes out of Christianity?
Christopher?
The condition in which one has to live, and I think more and more so as our horizons of knowledge expand and show us how little we know. We know less and less about more and more, but we have a bigger idea of our ignorance, a more grand idea cosmologically and anthropologically. The position you have to take, you're forced to take, is one of intellectual doubt and of being compelled to think for yourself. There are no certainties. There are no faiths you can comfortingly cling to. You have to keep on renewing the adventure of inquiry without bias and without prejudice. This is what the Socratic method taught us before we understood how much we were going to need it. Now, though there's no absolute proof that Socrates ever existed, he didn't ever write anything down. He's only written about secondhand. A bit like Jesus in that way, of whom I also think there's no conclusive proof. It doesn't matter to me that he didn't exist, or if he didn't exist, because the method and the doubt and the dialectic is still with us. Whereas for Dinesh, it has to matter like anything. If Jesus didn't exist, and if he not only didn't exist, but briefly did cease to exist, having been existent, and then became existent again after 3 days, if that's not true, then his position is in ruins.
Well,
I would never subject myself to such a ridiculous and hazardous position.
Dinesh?
Well, I completely
where everything is staked on the supernatural, which is a dimension that, as it happens, doesn't have any real existence.
Dinesh?
I would completely identify with this idea of doubt and skepticism and not accepting things on reason unless there's evidence and proof for it. And I don't think that that's inconsistent with religious belief at all. Now, it's true that under religious belief, there are certain things that you hold that are either not susceptible. Take the